She wasn't allowed to sit at their table. They barely said her name. For 3 years, she scrubbed their mansion, watched their secrets unravel, and stayed silent. But when a billion-dollar heirloom vanished, every headline called her a thief. Until she walked into court and said 6 words that shattered the country. Stay tuned. The truth they buried is about to rise. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. She had walked through that front gate a dozen times, wearing the same gray uniform skirt, pressed white blouse, and low sensible shoes, gloved hands carrying cleaning supplies in a silent ritual. To the world beyond the outer security cameras, she was simply the maid, a shadow among marbled floors, high ceilings, gleaming glass walls, and priceless art. No one ever asked her name. No one ever learned it. In those early months, she learned quickly how invisibility worked in that mansion. She passed unnoticed in the corridors of power, her footsteps muffled, her presence tolerated but unacknowledged. At breakfast, she quietly cleared unwashed dishes, while the billionaire sat across the long mahogany table, his back to the hallway, discussing CEOs, mergers, and acquisitions with his daughter and his lawyer. She moved behind their chairs, refilling water, collecting plates. Her breathing was steady, her pulse hidden. She was, by design, unremarkable. She was not invisible to herself. Her name was Marissa Blake, 32, eyes that held quiet intelligence, hands that had scrubbed houses all her life. She had grown up in a city where no one asked her to dream, only to survive. But this mansion, the one built by a tycoon whose world she briefly inhabited, felt like a stage too grand to ever belong to her. Still, she stepped in daily, polished silver candlesticks, dusted gilded picture frames, fluffed pillows on velvet chairs. She learned which doorknobs creaked, which light switches were temperamental, which curtains needed gentle coaxing. That knowledge made her careful, cautious, and almost invisible. Her invisibility was a shield. But in mornings when she glimpsed the family through recessed windows, the billionaire's wife with her silk robe, the daughter leaning on the banister, she felt the weight of being unseen. They greeted each other with nods, or polite, perfunctory hello, rarely meeting her eyes. Occasional remarks, don't forget the foyer, be sure the patio glows, but seldom by name, rarely a please. It stung, that absence of acknowledgement. She composed herself, practiced polite speech, answered only when addressed. She was always just the maid, and they insisted on it. But she carried a mind. Marissa memorized floor plans, staff schedules, security routines. She noticed when maintenance men whispered behind her, noticed camera angles, noticed which corridors were rarely traversed. She cataloged details in her memory. No one ever asked her why she remembered so much. In staff meetings, others joked she must have a photographic memory. No one challenged it. No one suspected she was there for more than dusting. On one afternoon in late summer, the mansion brimmed with tension. The billionaire, Victor Harrington, had flown away on business, leaving his daughter Evelyn to oversee things in his absence. The wife, Helena, retreated to private chambers, preoccupied. The household staff felt the pull of an unsettled silence, as though something was missing even before it vanished. Marissa sensed it first. She stood behind the marble columns of the entrance hall and watched the staff shuffle. The security captain, a hulking man named Owens, barked orders about schedule changes. The valet looked uneasy. The chef paused mid-chop, washing his hands a second too long. The atmosphere was taut, like a string stretched nearly to breaking. She carried her cleaning cloth through the library, Victor's favorite space, filled with rare leather volumes, framed letters, and delicate artifacts. She dusted the edges of an ornate glass case that held an heirloom necklace, passed down through generations of the Harrington line. Diamonds arranged in a swirling phoenix motif, said to be worth tens of millions. She paused, mid-wipe, because the case stood open. Her heart jolted. The glass top was unlatched. The necklace, the star of the family's legacy, had disappeared. Her hands froze, the cloth dangling. In that shard of stillness, she inhaled sharply. The silence of the room seemed to close in. She had never touched that display, except to wipe smudges on the glass exterior, never opened it. Yet there it was, open, empty. Her mind rattled. Who? And how? The case was secure. Security sensors lined the room. Only a few trusted staff had access codes to open it. Only the family, and some inner circle. She leaned in close, eyes scanning the hinges. The locks beneath the case. A fragment of fingerprint residue glinted under the library lights, smudged, indistinct. She crouched, heart pounding. Then she straightened, swallowed, placed her cloth back in her hands, and walked out as if nothing had happened. But nothing could ever be the same after that. In the days that followed, tension prickled through the mansion. Helena was frantic when she discovered the missing necklace at dinner. A scream caught in her throat. The crash of her silver goblet. Evelyn huddled in the study, hands trembling. Security officers swarmed. Investigators arrived. The household staff was interrogated, one by one, told not to talk, told to produce alibis, told that guilt would be found unless confessed. And in all that chaos, all that suspicion, all that frantic accusation, all eyes fixed, all suspicion sharpened, Marissa remained the only one. The cameras and probes overlooked. The family's lawyers and private detectives combed through guest logs, security footage, even the maid's schedule. They wondered if a guest had broken in, if someone from outside had stolen the heirloom. But as they searched outward, the most human possibility, the person inside their walls, remained unseen. Marissa kept working. She walked into the dining hall in the early morning, polished silver before the others arrived, her face blank, her posture solid. When Evelyn passed her in the hallway, the daughter's eyes flicked, a startled, skeptical flash, but Evelyn looked away quickly. No confrontation, no question. Marissa knelt to clean under a heavy cabinet, ears straining for voices behind walls. She memorized their footsteps, their words clipped with fear. She catalogued which rooms were locked, which corridors off-limit. She was backstairs and backstage, closer to everything than they realized. Inside, she felt the panic in walls, the paranoia, the cameras repositioned, the guards doubling night patrols. She felt the weight of suspicion gathering like a storm overhead. Someone already whispered her name. To someone unkind. One night she heard two staffers whisper in the servants' quarters, "We have to check Marissa's locker. Maybe she took it. She's too calm." She froze in the dark corridor, her hands curled, but she said nothing. She retreated, heart thundering. Yet she did not panic. She did not flee. She stayed. Because she needed to prove what no one believed, that she was not what they saw. She walked down marble steps into dim hallways, cataloging footprints, checking access logs in her memory, staying invisible but alert. She watched Helena pacing in sleepless nights, Evelyn gnawed on her lip, the security head glancing at staff photos, comparing, cross-checking. No one thought to compare the house's own maid to a suspect. That would be too audacious, too cruel. That was the twist they depended on. And then the day arrived when the private detective, a sleek, sharp-eyed woman named Marlowe Bates, stepped out in the foyer, ring binder in hand, staring at Marissa. The detective asked staff to gather in the great hall. Marissa stood among them, shoulders stiff, face calm. The detective's eyes scanned the group. Her voice, firm, cold, said, "One of you knows more than you've told us." Every staff member swallowed. Silence stretched, and all those eyes, those accusations, those suspicions, they turned toward Marissa Blake, the girl who cleaned their floors, the shadow they never noticed, until now. As the detective lifted a leather binder and began to read aloud evidence, a shiver ran through Marissa's spine. She knew the moment she was being accused. And just then, an internal alarm, a memory she hadn't thought about, flickered. She remembered a secret code scratched faintly on a ledger she once cleaned, a number sequence she memorized as she wiped dust. She realized in that moment, the key to proving her innocence lay inside that binder. But would she have time to get it before they pointed their finger? Hiring Marissa Blake had never been about her resume, her attention to detail, or even her references. To the Harrington family, she represented something else, a symbol, a quiet gesture toward diversity, without having to share a table with it. Victor Harrington's wife, Helena, had handpicked her from a housekeeping agency in Midtown, one that specialized in discreet, presentable staff. Helena's exact words during the interview were polite, but distant. A smile stretched just enough to look progressive for the camera. "You come highly recommended," Helena had said that first morning, sitting behind an ivory desk, her tones syruped with condescension. "We've had issues before, you see. Cleanliness, punctuality, honesty. I'm sure that won't be a problem with you." Marissa had smiled lightly. "No, ma'am. It won't." Helena's eyes flicked toward the agency representative, a subtle glance that carried the unspoken question, can she be trusted? Then back to Marissa, whose calm posture seemed to irritate her. You'll wear the uniform we provide, Helena continued. And we expect quiet efficiency, no chatter, no personal calls. You'll find the other maids very respectful. Respectful. That word had always meant obedient. From day one, Marissa understood she wasn't hired to clean. She was hired to disappear. The Harrington mansion demanded polish, perfection, silence. Her role was to make the life of power appear effortless, and her presence was meant to vanish into that illusion. It was never about skill. It was about control. Every morning began at 5 a.m., before dawn cracked over the sprawling estate. She would clock in through the back gate, past the small camera that blinked red, and greet the security guard who never looked her in the eye. Morning, she'd murmur. No reply. She'd step inside the staff corridor, where muted fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and pull her uniform from the ironed rack. In the early hours, she often paused near the grand staircase to listen to the house breathe, the low hum of air vents, the drip of distant sprinklers, the muted shuffle of others like her. The mansion had its own rhythm, footsteps of wealth echoing above, whispers of labor beneath. By 8, the house transformed. Laughter upstairs, conference calls, the rich aroma of imported coffee. Downstairs, the shuffle of workers, cooks, gardeners, chauffeurs, each moving in rehearsed choreography. Marissa learned to read tones, micro-expressions, silences. She could tell when Helena's mood darkened. The sound of her heels clicked faster across marble. She could sense when Victor's temper loomed, the sudden slam of a door in his study, the terse hum of his voice during phone calls. And she could feel Evelyn's sadness, the way the daughter lingered near hallways, looking at her phone as if searching for escape. Sometimes Evelyn tried to speak to her. Do you ever get tired? She asked one morning, watching Marissa polish the banister. Marissa looked up, caught off guard by the sincerity in the girl's tone. Sometimes, she said. Then why stay? Evelyn asked quietly. Marissa hesitated, the cloth still in her hand. Because staying, she replied, isn't the same as belonging. Sometimes it's the only way to be seen. Ellen had nodded faintly, as if she understood. But soon after, Helena appeared behind her. Evelyn, she snapped, her voice cutting through the air. You have a call with your father's office. Don't waste time in idle talk. The girl stepped away, murmuring, sorry, Marissa. Helena didn't look at Marissa when she added, don't encourage familiarity. Boundaries are there for a reason. Those words lingered for weeks. The other staff understood the unwritten rules too. They warned Marissa early. Don't make eye contact too long. Don't be too visible. The head housekeeper, a sharp-eyed woman named Rosa, told her bluntly, it's not your world, honey. You're here to make theirs easier. That's the game. But Marissa had never been good at playing games she didn't believe in. Beneath her calm silence lived a sharp awareness, a restless anger buried under professionalism. Each yes ma'am, each of course sir, cost her something small, invisible yet cumulative. She felt it eroding pieces of her spirit, one polite smile at a time. Sometimes at night, when the family retired and the house finally quieted, she lingered in the library, the same library where the heirloom necklace gleamed behind glass. She studied the books she wasn't meant to touch, volumes on finance, law, art history. She traced her finger across embossed titles and whispered their meanings under her breath. It was her secret rebellion, knowledge in a place designed to keep her ignorant. And yet, what hurt most was not the labor or the hours. It was the way people like Helena looked through her, as if her blackness was a permanent stain on her identity, something that required her to keep proving her worth, over and over. The slightest mistake, a smudge on a glass, a delay in service became a test of character. Be grateful, Rosa would whisper after one of Helenita's thinly veiled reprimands. Some of us can't even get through that door. But gratitude had a strange taste when it was served with humiliation. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the east corridor, Marissa caught two guests whispering while she arranged flowers in a vase. One of them, a tall man in a navy suit, gestured subtly toward her. I see they've diversified the staff, he chuckled. The other woman smirked. It photographs well, doesn't it? Victor's PR team finally got something right. Marissa didn't flinch. She continued arranging lilies, her back straight, her eyes down. but her fingers trembled. Later that evening, she sat in the servants' quarters alone, staring at her reflection in the small cracked mirror. Her face was calm, composed, but behind her eyes was something fierce. Not rage, but resolve. She whispered to herself, "They think silence means weakness." That night, she decided silence would be her disguise, not her defeat. Days later, the mansion prepared for a charity gala. Politicians, CEOs, and celebrities filled the halls, cameras flashing, laughter echoing across the marble. Marissa moved like a shadow among the crowd, refilling champagne glasses, collecting plates, listening to fragments of conversations about markets, philanthropy, and power. As the orchestra played softly, Victor Harrington stood near the staircase, smiling for photographers. His wife glowed beside him. Evelyn lingered behind, her expression distant, and Marissa stood a few feet away, unnoticed, watching him hand over an envelope to a man in a gray suit. Their words were quiet, but Marissa's sharp ears caught fragments. Transfers, not traceable, overseas accounts. She frowned subtly, glancing up. The man in gray slipped the envelope into his jacket, murmuring, "It'll be gone before morning, just like last time." Last time. Marissa blinked, pretending to wipe the nearby table, her pulse rising. She caught Victor's reply, soft but distinct. "Good. Helena can never know." Her breath stilled. She felt the weight of those words land heavy in her chest. And in that moment, she understood something terrible. The world she worked for was built on illusion, and she had been maintaining it brick by brick. When the party ended, she returned to the staff quarters, her mind buzzing. That conversation was a spark, something that didn't belong in the rhythm of normalcy. But she knew the cost of knowing too much. People like her didn't get to overhear the powerful and live unscathed. That night, as she scrubbed the marble floor near the foyer, she heard Helena's voice echo down the hallway, sharp, anxious. "Victor, what are you hiding from me?" Victor's reply was cold, practiced. "You imagine too much." The air thickened. Marissa froze, the mop in her hand dripping. Their voices lowered, but one phrase reached her, muffled through the crack of a half-closed door. "If anyone finds out, it'll ruin us." Marissa stepped back slowly, her mind racing. What it was, she didn't know, but she knew one thing. This job wasn't meant to uplift her. It was meant to break her spirit, to keep her quiet, complicit, unseen. Yet she was seeing more than anyone realized. She turned off the light in the corridor, the glow fading into silence, and whispered to herself, "They hired the wrong maid to keep their secrets." But that promise, silent, defiant, would soon cost her everything. Because later that same week, while she gathered linens near the guest hallway, she overheard something far more dangerous. A conversation between Victor and his lawyer that wasn't meant for her ears. And in that exchange, buried beneath arrogance and secrecy, lay a truth that would change everything, if she lived long enough to act on it. They had always whispered about trust and loyalty, but never meant either for someone like Marissa. Now with the heirloom necklace gone, and the wind of suspicion sweeping through the Harrington mansion, another disappearance demanded attention. Millions of dollars vanished from Victor's private vault. The loss was so spectacular that the world would later call it the vanishing fortune. But within the mansion's walls, the narrative already formed, and in it, Marissa was cast as the villain. In the early hours after the gala, Victor paced in his private study, phone pressed to his ear, his face grim. He spoke in clipped tones, demanding answers, threatening legal action, accusing unnamed insiders of betrayal. Helena hovered in the doorway, face pale, clutching a silk scarf to her throat, as though to catch tears she would never allow herself to shed. Evelyn watched from the staircase, trembling. Security officers in crisp suits circulated around them, whispering in corners, and Marissa, descending from the staff corridor, felt the tremors of panic in the mansion's foundation. Within days, detectives and auditors swarmed. They audited bank statements, traced wire transfers, requested logs from offshore accounts. The mansion staff was put on a tight leash, no one allowed in the inner sanctums, without supervision. The head of security, Owens, interrogated the valet, the gardener, the butler. He quizzed them about every financial transaction they'd overheard or seen. He quizzed them about Schiff's keys, who had access to the vault. He pulled aside the tech staff to search digital footprints. He insisted on coverage of all video feeds. But when investigators reviewed the vault room's security logs, they found anomalies. A time slot showed that an access card, delayed kill code, had opened the vault for exactly 8 minutes on a night when no high-level staff were supposed to be in the building. The system logs flagged the engineer who maintained the biometric locks as faulty override, and a technician's account as unauthorized access. But when they traced that account, it led to a terminal in the staff corridor, near Marissa's locker. They summoned Marissa to the study. The detective Marlo Bates stood there, arms folded, files stacked on the table beside her. Victor's handsome face was tight, as though every muscle strained against what he believed. Helena looked away, turning to a painting on the wall. Evelyn sat perched on the armrest of a leather sofa, face bluish-white, eyes hollow with anguish. Bates's voice was cold. "Ms. Blake, you understand how serious these allegations are." Marissa nodded, her heart hammered. "You worked in this house. You cleaned the vault room floor, walked past the corridors, had proximity to the staff corridors with access points. The system logs. Someone used a card at your locker's vicinity. You must explain how you could not have been aware." For a moment, Marissa felt the air leave the room. She opened her mouth, closed it, inhaled. She realized they were not asking for truth. They were demanding confession. She said, controlled, "I don't know anything about missing money. I cleaned rooms. I follow schedules. I never had clearance to enter the vault." Bates's eyes flicked to the security printouts. "But the logs show your locker terminal was used, and that the override was traced to your shift's hours." Helena's voice broke. "I trusted you." Behind them, Evelyn covered her mouth, tears brimming. The walls pressed in. The accusation was loud and clear. Marissa was the insider thief. She was ordered to stay in her quarters. Her belongings were searched. Her locker was emptied. She watched as staff technicians loaded USB drives, disconnected terminals, copied data. Every file she had touched was subject to review. She watched as camera angles she'd cleaned before were rotated, timestamps rechecked, scrutinized bit by bit. She felt the scrutiny like shards against her skin. In her quarters, late at night, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, face in her hands. She sifted through memories, every access badge she'd ever handled, every shift she'd ever worked. She tried to imagine how the logs could implicate her. She replayed the gala night, the envelope she overheard, Victor's half-promise to Helena. She tried to find holes. She held her breath. Then in a whisper her mind clicked. The key was in the ledger she'd wiped dust from weeks ago, the one with the faint code she memorized. She hurried from her quarters to the small staff lounge, accessed her smartphone in secret, and attempted to search a remote cloud backup link she sometimes used for private notes. But the link had been disabled. The cloud folder was gone, deleted, every file erased. She stood in the dark, heart pounding, realizing someone had anticipated her move. Someone had cleared her path of evidence, or planted false evidence. She had not just been accused, she was being framed. The next morning, as she was escorted to a meeting with the legal team, she passed the security room. She peered inside. The screens glowed with camera feeds, hallways, corridors, the foyer, the vault room. She recognized a corridor she cleaned daily. She recognized the angle from which she wiped windows dozens of times. And then her gaze settled on one screen, that of the vault room, from a narrow angle. But it was black. The feed had cut. The tape segment that should have shown the 8-minute window was absent. Marissa froze. It wasn't an error. It was deletion. Someone purposeful. The negative space in the camera's recording swallowed the proof she needed. She walked away, heart hollow, each step sinking deeper. If she could not show the footage, how could she clear her name? The walls of evidence closed in. She felt the weight of their collective eyes as she entered the meeting room. Bates, Victor, Helena, all sat as though fate was predetermined. As Bates began to recite the case against her, detailing the logs, the missing funds, the missing footage, and her proximity to the terminal, Marissa's throat clenched. She scanned their faces, stern, disappointed, convinced. Then she realized one thing: she would need to find another tape, another proof. But the person who deleted the footage was still inside this house. And at that moment, among the cold stares and the ticking silence, she understood. The real thief was still walking these halls, and they were part of the Harrington circle. Her heart thudded. But before she could fragment the room with her revelation, Bates turned to the legal representative and whispered, "We have another issue." The camera in the staff lounge was active that night, and it shows someone entering the lounge at 2:17 a.m. But the video is corrupt. The frame where we might see a face is scrambled beyond recognition. Marissa's breath caught. That corrupted frame, the one that might show the real culprit, was the last lead they had. She gripped her chair. In that moment she knew, if that tape remained unreadable, she would be nailed. And as she realized how precarious everything had become, she heard a low chime on Bates's phone. A message alert. Bates looked at the screen. His face went pale. He flicked his eyes toward Marissa. "Miss Blake," he said, voice trembling. "You should see this." Marissa leaned forward. The dusty courtroom air hung heavy, and the next image projected onto the conference screen was one she could never have predicted. Her fingerprints were everywhere, on silver trays, crystal goblets, mirrored walls, doorknobs polished to perfection, even on the cold metal panel beside the family vault. And that was the problem. Marissa's very existence in the Harrington mansion had made her traceable, accountable, suspicious, everything a black woman was trained to avoid in spaces not built for her. She had scrubbed grime off marble tiles and cleared lipstick stains from wine glasses at midnight galas, only to now be told that her presence proved her guilt. The very thing they required of her, to touch everything, to tend everything, was now what turned against her. She had access to every room, one investigator had noted, circling her name on a document in red ink. She cleaned here daily. Victor Harrington had barely looked up. Then that's all we need. Marissa, seated outside the meeting room, could hear their words, as though a wall of glass separated her from justice. She'd been trained not to flinch, to stay calm, to answer respectfully, but this time, a different heat pulsed under her skin. They had used her proximity to their wealth as evidence, her labor as motive, her silence as guilt, and none of it was accidental. She remembered Rose's words weeks ago. We touch everything, so when something goes missing, it's easiest to blame the hands already there. The mansion now felt less like a place of work, and more like a crime scene, with her as the predetermined suspect. The new narrative had spread quickly. Whispers moved through staff quarters, some sympathetic, some cold. "You think she really did it?" one of the junior maids whispered to another. "I mean, she's smart, right?" "Too smart, maybe," the other replied. "They say she knew the access codes before some of the guards did." Marissa heard it all. And still, she moved through her shifts like clockwork, ordered, composed, dignified. But inside she was unraveling. She replayed every move from that night. The gala, the flickering candlelight, the way the man in the gray suit had slipped the envelope into his coat. She remembered hearing the words "not traceable" and "overseas accounts." She recalled the corridor she'd walked down minutes before the vault log showed unauthorized access. It wasn't enough to say she didn't do it. She had to prove who did. And so, in the quietest hours, Marissa did what no one expected. She began her own investigation. She retraced her path through the East Wing, studying camera placements and blind spots. She studied the digital access logs of the staff terminals, still displayed in the staff lounge. She noted the timestamp that linked her to the crime. She hadn't even been in the building at that time. She had left early that day, a detail no one bothered to verify. She asked Rosa carefully, "Do we still have the physical sign-out logs from last month?" Rosa frowned. "They went digital last year. Old notebooks got stored in the basement archive." "Why?" Marissa smiled faintly, just trying to double-check something. She made her way to the basement the next night, long after the main house had quieted. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old paper. She found the box labeled "Staff Logs, Previous Quarter" and flipped through. There it was. A scribbled line with her signature, Marissa Blake, signed out 11:07 p.m., the night of the missing million. She photographed the page, backed up the image to a hidden folder. That evidence should have cleared her. Should have made someone pause. But it didn't, because the digital log had been altered. Her name was moved to a 2:17 a.m. timestamp. It was a classic frame job, but more than that, it was an erasure. Her truth was overwritten. She tried to bring this to Bates. He looked at her photo and said, "Where did you get this?" She answered plainly, "The basement archive. You can verify it." He stared at the image, then at her. "You know, tampering with evidence is a serious offense." Her mouth went dry. "I didn't tamper. I found what you missed." Bates didn't reply. She saw it then, the weight of doubt. Not doubt in her guilt, but in her permission to defend herself. The narrative had hardened. Her hands, the same ones that cleaned their heirlooms, cooked their meals, fixed their candles when they burned low, were now symbols of suspicion. And still the real culprit roamed free. But something else was bothering her. Something she couldn't shake. She remembered something strange. The week before the necklace vanished, Victor's office had been closed for repairs, and maintenance workers had been called in. She'd passed by one evening and noticed a silver laptop bag on the floor beside the desk, the same bag she later saw with the man in the gray suit at the gala. She hadn't thought much of it then. But now, she went to the maintenance logs. The name of the third-party contractor was redacted, but she found an address for billing. It was a shell company, listed in Nevada. And then a breakthrough. She remembered that the Harrington family's private server backups weren't stored on site. The family tech manager once let it slip during a casual conversation over coffee. "We use a satellite node server," he'd said, "off-site, private backup, in case the house gets compromised." She found the tech manager that afternoon. If there was an off-site backup of security tapes, she asked, how long would they store a deleted file? He blinked. Technically, up to 90 days. Why? Marissa looked him in the eye. Because I think someone wants you to believe I deleted a tape that proves I wasn't there. The tech manager hesitated. I'd have to ask permission. Do it anonymously, she whispered. And when you see the name of who accessed the vault, don't say a word. Just print it. That night, a slip of paper appeared under her door. It wasn't her name on the login that accessed the vault. It was Victor's lawyer. Suddenly, everything clicked. The envelope, the offshore accounts, the fear in Victor's voice. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came when Marissa, desperate to finally clear her name with this new printout, marched to the security office to confront Bates. She found the door open, the monitors glowing, and the vault camera footage she so desperately needed. It was gone, deleted, but not by accident, because the one place her fingerprints weren't was the vault keypad. And that keypad had been freshly cleaned by someone else. The moment the first article dropped, the narrative snapped into place. The media didn't wait for a trial. They didn't even wait for an arrest. They had a photo, a staff ID badge visible, a keyring dangling from Marissa's belt loop in some innocuous snapshot. And that was all they needed. Billionaire's maid caught in heist? Inside job? Black maid with access? The headlines screamed in bold, cynical type. The story spread like wildfire. In tabloids and on late-night talk shows, the speculation was brutal. Commentators parsed her background, where she lived, whom she knew, financial motives, rumors of a gambling debt. The disbelief was tinted with racial bias, often unspoken, always present. A black maid accused of stealing from her white employer sold more papers than 1,000 legal briefs. Marissa watched the media frenzy from inside the mansion, her eyes hidden behind the blinds of her quarters. She saw flickering light from TV screens in the lounge where staff huddled after shifts, silently gawking at her printed face in the headlines. Some shook their heads, some whispered, "How could she?" Others stared with pity. She felt humiliation scar across her chest like a hot blade. She wanted to scream. They didn't know her story. They didn't know what she had given up to be here. They only saw her in the frame someone else composed. Her name became a trending hashtag. Social media feeds lit up with threads debating her guilt, or typical opportunistic behavior. Some posters vilified her, others tried to defend her, but their voices were drowned by the tide of insinuation and gotcha soundbites. The image of a black maid with a keyring, filtered for maximum visual shock, became shorthand for betrayal in the public mind. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was suffocating. Evelyn avoided Marissa's eyes, crossing halls rapidly. Helena refused to speak to her directly. Victor's face grew colder in private meetings, as though her presence now carried accusation. The household resumed its routines, but every routine was now laced with tension. The butler paused before handing her cleaning tools. The valet hesitated when she passed. Cameras pivoted to catch staff on breaks. The mansion itself had become a stage designed to humiliate her. One afternoon, Rosa came to her quietly in the staff kitchenette. She whispered, "Be careful. They have photographers staking out your home." Marissa nodded, tension flaring at Rosa's worry. Rosa's eyes flickered with sorrow. "They're making you the villain they can sell." That evening, in the servants' quarters, Marissa sat on her bed and scrolled through her phone. She saw headlines like, "She cleaned his mess," "She stole his money," and from maid to mastermind. One article speculated about her childhood, her family, old arrests in a city across the state, none true. She read dozens of comments calling her lucky to have had a job, or typical. Her stomach twisted. The assault was invisible, but brutal. And then she got a tip, an anonymous message, via a burner number. "We know who did it. Don't let them gaslight you." It included a link to a private blog post with names and clues about parties, offshore accounts, hidden transfers. She opened it with trembling fingers. The post implicated a name she recognized, not a random outsider, but someone in Victor's close circle, his personal financial advisor, Julian Hart. Her breath hitched. Julian was trusted, elite, a man who appeared when Victor's assets had to be balanced, discreetly. He had access, knowledge, motive, and credibility. He moved inside boardrooms, power lunches, financial dinners. No one would suspect him. Marissa stared at the screen. The whisper in her ear. Someone close to the billionaire knew the real story, and they were hiding it. She shut the phone, heart pounding. If Julian Hart was involved, that meant the frame job might have been orchestrated from inside the inner circle. As night fell, Marissa crept from her quarters to the surveillance hub, the security room she knew well. Cameras watched every hallway. She slipped past guards she'd cleaned after. She knew their routes. She entered the room when the guard made his rounds. She accessed live feeds, rotated angles, watched the vault, the corridors. She keyed in the timestamp of the missing funds night. Every camera showed static in that window. Every lens that should have captured the vault was dark. But one feed surprised her. Julian Hart stepping into the maintenance closet near the vault an hour before the disappearance, carrying a laptop bag. She paused the video. The camera passed his face. She zoomed. His eyes looked away before the lens caught them clearly. He moved swiftly, practiced. Then he walked out, the cupboard door with him, inconspicuous. Marissa felt a bitter surge. She had proof, but she also knew that showing this video would pit her against the most powerful man in the bank, in her employer's circle, and would invite full fury. She backed out of the security room, heart racing. She had to hide her access. She turned off the monitor screen, locked the room behind her. She re-entered the mansion, footsteps echoing. In her quarters she tried calling Bates, but his line went straight to voicemail. She sent him the screenshot, encrypted, but no response came. Late that night, she heard a knock on her door. She froze. No one was supposed to knock, after hours. She slid to the door, heart thundering, and peered through the peephole. Outside stood Evelyn. Evelyn's eyes were red. She held an envelope. Evelyn whispered through the door, "I know you didn't do it." Marissa's breath caught, and Evelyn added quietly, "But I know someone who did, and I have the proof." In the hush, the mansion seemed to still, waiting. Marissa gripped the doorframe. She felt the weight of what was coming next. The peril. Evelyn slid the envelope under. Marissa picked it up. Inside were photographs, documents, transfer slips, and a single razor-sharp note. "You have 20. She raised her head. In the darkness beyond the hallway, a camera blinked. The mansion had secrets older than Victor Harrington's fortune. Secrets buried behind walls, under floors, hidden from the polished eyes of servants and guests alike. Marissa had always sensed that beneath the veneer of wealth lay fractures. But as the case against her grew sharper, she resolved to map those fractures, to find a corner no camera covered, a crevice no one cleaned. Evelyn's envelope sat open on her narrow dresser desk, in the servants' quarters. The documents inside were jagged. Transfer slips, internal memos, a copy of the contract between Victor and Hart's shell company in Nevada, time-stamped days before the gala. A photo Julian Hart entering the vault hallway, late at night. One memo in particular caught her eye, a margin note in faint handwriting. Underground repository code 0. Her pulse raced. An underground repository? She knew no such location was in any of the architectural blueprints she'd studied. But if such a repository existed, it would lie beneath the mansion, perhaps beneath the floors or in sub-basements. If Hart had a secret vault hidden within the walls, then the missing money and the necklace could have been stashed there, and cameras wouldn't catch it, because it would be off the systems. That night, she rose after midnight, swallowed fear, and crept from her quarters. The halls were silent, lit only by moon-filtered corridor lights. She passed the library, security room, the dining hall, all dark and still. She carried a flashlight and the envelope. She went to the basement entrance, an old wrought iron door tucked behind utility panels. She unlocked it quietly, Rose's duplicate key, provided earlier in a whispered conversation. The basement was dusted with old mechanical rooms, boiler pipes, storage boxes. She found the furnace room, the old ducting, maintenance passages. She studied the brick wall opposite the boiler. It looked unremarkable, covered in pipes and soot, but behind remnants of old plaster she found a seam, a panel that did not exactly match the rest. Running her fingers along the edges, she found a thin crack. Her heart pounded. She pried it gently with a screwdriver she carried. The panel slid inward. Behind it lay a narrow tunnel, a corridor shaped from raw bricks and wire conduits, leading deeper. She swallowed, shone the light in, and stepped in. The tunnel curved under the mansion, the low ceiling brushing her hair. Dust motes danced in the beam. Her footsteps echoed. Wires hung from ceiling conduits. She saw pipes dripping. She edged forward, mind alert. After several yards, the corridor ended in a small chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, crates, file boxes, and black metal cases. Not part of any official record. She swallowed and approached. She peeled back the lid of a crate. Bundles of cash wrapped in plastic, stacks of checks, an old leather case stamped Harrington Family Trust. Her eyes caught the glint of the phoenix necklace, nestled in velvet. She gasped, silently. This was the hidden repository. The money, the jewelry, all concealed here beneath the marble, beyond the eyes of security. This chamber was proof. Not circumstantial, not partial, direct. She bent, feeling sweat on her skin, and photographed everything with her phone. Cash stacks, documents, wires, cases. The pendant. Her hands trembled but her face held control. But she paused when she noticed something more. A ledger, open, and a single sheet of paper pinned down by a heavy book. The paper bore handwriting. To be destroyed, once inventory is confirmed. A signature was faint, J. Hart. Under it, a set of initials, VH. Her throat tightened. It was collusion. The signature of Hart and Victor Harrington. The missing funds, the missing necklace. Every act pointed to the men she served, closer than she dared imagine. But there was one more detail she almost missed. Next to the ledger box lay an envelope addressed to E. Harrington, in Helena's own handwriting, labeled "In case of absence, secure assets here." Evelyn's name, Helena had known. She must have known all along. That envelope implied Helena either authorized or knew of the underground repository. The betrayal cut sharply. She pocketed the envelope, backed slowly, heart thudding. She paused at the threshold, and froze as a faint, low hiss of air sounded behind her. A door? A vent? Someone else was here. She extinguished the flashlight and pressed against the wall, breath shallow, heart hammering. In the faint darkness, movement. A figure emerged at the chamber's entrance. A slender silhouette in business attire, holding a flashlight. They stepped forward. Marissa swallowed. She recognized that silhouette. Julian Hart. He paused, staring at her in shadow. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said, voice soft, but loaded. She swallowed. "The evidence is here," she whispered. "But that isn't enough. I have to show it." His laugh was quiet, hollow. "You should have stayed invisible. Now you don't know what's coming." She flicked on the flashlight again, shining it on crates and documents. She lifted the envelope she pocketed. Hart's face hardened. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said steadily. "I know more than you think." He took a step forward. "You leave me no choice." A noise echoed behind Hart. Marissa glanced past him. The corridor beyond lit faintly. She gasped. Another silhouette. A second figure coming down the tunnel toward them. He blocked her view, stepping between Marissa and the other arrival. In the dim light, she recognized that second man, not Victor but someone she least suspected. Owens, head of security. Owens's heavy footsteps reverberated. Hart turned toward him, hand twitching. Owens said nothing. His face was blank. Hart's voice cracked. "You were supposed to guard the perimeter." Owens tilted his head. "I guard the real perimeter." Hart's eyes narrowed. He turned back to Marissa. "Run," he hissed. "If you want to live." She froze. Behind them the tunnel walls faded into darkness. Ahead, two powerful men stood between her and escape corridor. In that moment, she realized, the secret they buried beneath marble floors was more than financial theft. It was betrayal, collusion, a conspiracy that touched every part of the Harrington legacy. Her evidence was not just leverage, it was explosive. She inhaled, summoning every ounce of courage. She took a step backward, and as Hardin Owens advanced, the walls echoed with silent accusation. From the moment the subterranean chamber was revealed, Marissa's world shifted irrevocably. The hidden repository, the collusion, Hardin Owens standing over her, all confirmed that she was not just a scapegoat, she was a pawn, and powerful pawns often died in silence. Word leaked quickly. The legal team and investigators convened behind closed doors. Marissa was formally indicted, charged with grand larceny, breach of trust, and aiding in money laundering. The media erupted. Maid arrested for billionaire heist, inside job, maid at the center of scandal. Headlines were merciless, frame perfect. The black maid betrayed the white dynasty. Her defense attorney, a private counsel hired under pressure from Victor, arrived with thick binders, stern face, and rehearsed sympathy. He met Marissa in a glassed interview room, in the security wing. She sat across the table, shoulders squared, fists quiet in her lap. He said, "They want to make a public example. The prosecutors want a confession, or at least a plea. They're building a narrative. You're the inside threat. You're ambitious. You had access." Marissa's voice was steady. "But the hidden vault, the repository, the photos Evelyn gave me, that proves I didn't do it." He swallowed. "That's solid evidence. But there are two problems. First, the chain of custody. You can't just show it. Someone will say it was planted. Second, you're a black maid with no political influence. Public sentiment is already poisoned. If they portray you as greedy, racist tropes will drown your defense." She exhaled. He continued, "We need leverage. We need someone credible to break. Then we need to flip the narrative. You, the whistleblower, not the thief." She nodded, despite the ache in her chest. She'd already begun thinking that way. She was not the villain. She could become the one who exposed villains. Days passed in a blur of interrogations, motions, evidence reviews. Her quarters were essentially a holding cell, though she still walked brief corridors under guard. She saw the kitchen pass her window. She glimpsed staff eating silently. She recognized Rosa's posture, sympathetic fear. Then, on day 7 of the indictment hearing schedule, the court appointed a press gag order. No one was allowed to speak outside the courtroom about the evidence. But that didn't stop leaks. The narrative continued in tabloids, in gossip, in rumors, and coded accusations. Her reputation was bleeding. Her attorney sat her down one evening. "You might want to make a deal, limited immunity for testimony against Hart or Victor." He looked at her cautiously hopeful. "They might let you walk if you cooperate." Marissa looked at him squarely. "I won't bargain with the innocent. I'll talk only with proof." He glanced away. "That's risky." It was, but she was tired of being painted as guilty when she had been framed. She calculated, if she could extract Hart's confession, Victor's involvement, then she wouldn't just defend herself. She'd indict the powerful. On the morning of the hearing, Marissa was escorted under heavy security into a grand courtroom. Cameras lined the galleries. Reporters in suits watched behind glass. Her uniform had been replaced with a simple black dress. Her hair was neat, her face calm but stern. Victor sat in the witness box briefly, his white collar crisp. Helena behind him looked fragile, a porcelain mask of grief. Evelyn sat obscured at the far side. Hart was there with his lawyer, face composed. The prosecuting attorney announced, "The state will show beyond reasonable doubt that Marissa Blake orchestrated the theft and laundering of millions, with motive and method." Her heart pounded. The judge peered over his glasses, inviting her defense. Bates, the detective, testified about the access logs, the terminal near her locker, the deleted vault footage, the corrupted frame. He called Marissa's explanation implausible. At a pause, her defense attorney rose. "Your Honor, we have new evidence." A lawyer escorted Evelyn forward. Evelyn's face was pale, but resolute. She held an envelope, similar to the one Marissa had seen earlier. The courtroom murmured. Evelyn walked to the bench and placed it before the judge. She stood quietly. Her attorney said inside this envelope is the hidden vault evidence, photos, ledgers, the signatures implicating Hart and Victor. "We wish to submit it now." The judge frowned. Prosecutors protested. Victor's legal team protested. Hart's eyes widened. Evelyn's voice was steady as she said, "I never believed Marissa did this. I believe someone powerful wanted a scapegoat." Marissa held her breath. Time stretched. The judge took the envelope, opened it, her lawyer watching his face. He studied the pages. Then he looked at Bates. He looked at the prosecutors. "Stand down," he said quietly. "This changes things." Victor sat frozen. Hart's jaw tightened. The courtroom leaned forward. Then, before the judge could rule, Marissa's phone vibrated in her pocket, though she shouldn't have had it. It displayed a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust Evelyn." Marissa's heart jolted. She glanced at Evelyn. Evelyn's face remained calm, almost too calm. In that echoing hush, Marissa realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe. The real betrayal may lie even deeper, beyond Evelyn's sympathy or Hart's greed. And just then her defense attorney whispered to her, "You're going to regret seeing that message. But we have to act." Marissa's throat tightened. The courtroom fell silent, awaiting the next move. She lifted her gaze to Evelyn, then to the judge. If Evelyn was already being warned, or threatened, then the game had more layers than she imagined. She steadied herself. And when the judge cleared his throat to speak, Marissa reached into her mind for the next move. The one call no one saw coming, which would force the next reveal. Marissa sat in her quarters that night, the courtroom silence echoing inside her skull. The message "Don't trust Evelyn" pulsed on her phone like a heartbeat. It felt like a warning, or a threat. Her pulse pounded, her mind whirling. The judge's gavel had not yet fallen. The trial was still in limbo. The evidence Evelyn delivered had changed everything. Yet that message reminded her something was rotten, even beneath that shift. She stared at the envelope Evelyn had placed before the court. Pages of contracts, vault schematics, handwritten signatures, and the secret ledger. That evidence was powerful. Yet it was also fragile, subject to claims of tampering. And now, with the warning text in her pocket, she feared the strings behind that evidence might be pulled by hands she could not see. Later that night, she paced her small room. The walls seemed to close in. She ran fingers along the phone screen, scrolled through the files Evelyn had given her. She cross-checked dates, signatures, wire transfers. She tried to anticipate what the prosecution might challenge next. But every move she made felt more dangerous than the last. She thought of Julian Hart, of Victor, of Owens. She thought of the deep vault beneath the floors. She thought of Evelyn standing in court, calm and resolute. Was Evelyn protected, or was she being used? In the early hours, exhaustion tugged at her resolve. She placed her phone on silent and rested her head against the wall. As she closed her eyes, she heard a soft sound, a faint scuffle outside her door. She sat up, breath caught. The room was dark. She slipped to the door, pressed an ear to it. The corridor beyond was quiet, but footsteps hesitated. She held her breath. A shadow passed the peephole. The handle clicked, then locked. She recoiled, heart slamming. Someone had locked her in. She moved to the window, eyes straining. The night was deep. The grounds were silent. The door remained locked. She realized someone inside the mansion wanted to keep her silent. She tried her phone. No signal. The line to Bates was disconnected. No messages. Panic crept in, but she forced it down. She could not afford panic. She searched her mind for strength. Then the intercom buzzed. The small speaker by the door crackled. A voice she recognized. Low and steady. "Ms. Blake, open the door. Detective Marlowe Bates here." Her pulse surged. Bates? He was supposed to be with the case, not breaking into her quarters. Her heart swung between relief and suspicion. She hesitated. Should she trust him? Then the intercom clicked again. "I have new proof. I need to speak with you personally." The voice was urgent, earnest. Slowly, she pressed the unlock button. The door clicked. Bates stepped in, closing the door behind him. He looked haggard, older, thinner. His trench coat was damp from rain. He offered no greeting. He said, quietly, "I'm sorry I gave you the cold shoulder before. Things are worse than any of us thought." Marissa's eyes searched his. She asked, "What do you mean?" Bates walked to the small table. He placed a manila folder beside her phone. Inside are recordings, conversations you were never meant to hear. He slid the folder toward her. She opened it. Audio transcripts. Phone recordings. One file, Julian Hart and Victor in conversation, referencing removing the loose end, quieting the maid, ensuring the narrative stays buried. Words she already suspected, but now in their own voices. Her hands trembled. Bates said, "I couldn't bring this earlier. the threats, the pressure, but I believe the original investigators were compromised. Marissa drew in a shaky breath. Compromised? Bates nodded. By people above them. People like Hart, maybe Victor. They had eyes everywhere. Marissa stared, mind reeling. The betrayal went higher than she'd dared imagine. Bates said, "We can submit these, but only if you're ready. Once this surfaces, there's no turning back." She nodded slowly. She swallowed. "I'm ready." He looked at her, conflicted. "One more thing." Marissa looked up. Bates's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the hallway beyond the door. His voice dropped, urgent. "You need to leave this building tonight. They know where you are." Marissa's heart leapt. Before she could respond, the corridor beyond the door erupted in shouts and running footsteps. Someone pounded on her door from the outside, voices demanding entrance, keys turning, alarms buzzing. A click, the door handle jiggled. Bates turned, eyes wide. "They've breached the top floor security." Marissa's heart thundered in her ears. She clutched the folder to her chest, Bates at her side. Through the crack under the door came a voice, cold, insistent, commanding. "Open the door, Marissa Blake. This ends tonight." She steeled herself. She pressed her back to the wall, breath shallow. Whatever came next, the voice she would never allow herself to use, her voice, her truth would be unleashed. And then, she realized, the man behind all this was finally knocking. She had learned early, in a world built to ignore her, that knowledge was a slow-burning rebellion. She was told not to ask questions. She was told not to read beyond kitchen schedules. She was given chores, not projects. But in the hushed corners of the mansion, Marissa had taught herself to read financial statements, memorized security diagrams, tracked code numbers. In that silence, she sharpened her mind, quietly. What they thought was harmless servitude had become her training ground. Now armed with Bates's recordings and Evelyn's evidence, Marissa knew she held the power not only to clear her name, but to unravel their entire legacy. Yet to do so, she would have to expose who believed she should never be more than invisible. That morning, under guard, she was escorted to a restricted room in the mansion's lower levels, the evidence consolidation chamber. Legal staff, security personnel, and investigators were already there, files piled on a long table flanked by cameras. She stepped inside, heart in her throat. Her attorney motioned to the gathered group. "We will submit these new audio files and the repository documents." He nodded toward her. "Ms. Blake will walk you through." Whispers rippled. A prosecuting lawyer cleared her throat. A security guard shifted in his boots. Julian Hart's face, across the table, was calm, but his jaw clenched, as though he were stoic, but bracing for impact. Victor and Helena sat behind him, stiff, expressionless. Evelyn stood off to the side, arms folded. Marissa took a breath. She walked to the table, the files in hand, and began in a steady tone. "You've accused me of theft, of ambition, of violating trust, but you never believed I was intelligent enough to uncover your secret. You built systems to hide behind, blind spots, off-camera rooms, biased logs, but I mapped every one of them." She laid open the ledger, placed the cash stacks, the vault plan, the phony logs. She recited the forensic chain, how the repository lay beneath the floors, how Hart and Victor had accessed it, how the corrupted video frame had been planted to implicate her. She played the audio. Julian's voice, Victor's voice. Their conspiratorial tone. The room grew heavier with each playback. Hart rose, eyes cold.
"This is absurd. Fabricated audio. You could have planted this."
Marissa met his gaze. "You already built your frame on planted logs. Why stop now?" Victor stood too, voice low but trembling. "You don't understand what you've done. You've undone everything we built." Her attorney intervened. "Your Honor, we submit this as primary evidence. Let them respond." The judge studied the files, shifted in his chair, and then turned to the prosecution, demanding response. Their objections sputtered, challenges to authenticity, claims that recordings lacked proper chain of custody, suggestions of tampering, but the impact of hearing their voices sealed the room. Yet even as she watched the damage done, Marissa realized something unexpected, a deeper twist. Evelyn, standing to the side, shifted her weight. Her face, in the harsh light, betrayed conflict, fear, and shame. Marissa's mind flicked back to don't trust Evelyn. Had Evelyn been playing a deeper game? Could she have delivered evidence under pressure? Or was she protecting someone else? Hart's lawyer asked for a recess to validate authenticities. Everyone filed out slowly, security guards flanking, lawyers exchanging whispered glances. In the floor below, Marissa, Evelyn, Hart, Victor, Bates, and legal counsel remained in that evidence room, the air tightly wound. As the room emptied, Evelyn approached Marissa quietly, voice trembling. I never wanted you to be the fall guy. But there's something else. Something I learned about your past that changes everything. Marissa froze. She held her ground. What are you talking about? Ellen swallowed. I found a birth certificate. She handed a slip of paper. It says your real father was Harrison Blake. The same Harrison Blake who founded Harrington Enterprises decades ago. She hesitated. If you're his daughter, that means you were part of this legacy all along. And they hid it. Marissa's pulse thundered. She stared at the certificate. The name matched historical records of Blake family sponsors. Her birth city, her mother's maiden name, it aligned. She'd always known she was erased in her origins, but never imagined this. Hart's eyes flicked toward Evelyn, flickering with anger. Victor paled. Silence hung. Ellen whispered, they sealed the file, changed names, placed you at the lowest rung. They built a myth that the maid was powerless, so they could use you, betray you. Marissa took the paper, trembling. The entire frame, the conspiracy, the pain, it all flipped. She was not just the framed outsider. She was blood. She swallowed. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Evelyn looked down. I was afraid. If they know you know, they'll kill everything we built, including you. Marissa's mind raced. Her lineage, her identity, her work, all recontextualized. She had been part of their cover, her own erasure a tool. Her fight was no longer just about clearing her name. It was about reclaiming her legacy. Hart's lawyer entered, voice tense. Your Honor, may we proceed now? The judge nodded. As the evidence hearing resumed, Marissa sat, heart battered yet galvanizing. She realized she wouldn't just expose them. She would own the story. She glanced sideways at Evelyn, whose eyes darted away. She met Bates's gaze, and he nodded firmly. Because she wasn't just a maid. She was also the billionaire's secret. And the truth behind that, when exposed, would shatter more than reputations. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Heavy, unbreathable, dangerous. The paper trembled in Marissa's hands, the faint ink of a birth certificate decades old, stamped and sealed under another name. Her eyes traced it again. Father, Harrison Blake, Harrington. It was the name she had seen engraved on the marble plaque at the estate's front entrance countless times, etched into the company's logo, carved into the mantle she'd polished for years. The irony sliced deep. She had been cleaning the legacy she was born from. Helena's voice, thin and shaking, broke the silence. Evelyn, where did you find that? Ellen didn't look away from Marissa. In the family archives. It was filed under confidential holdings. It's real. Victor's complexion drained of color. That file was sealed. No one was supposed. Marissa turned toward him, her voice soft but razor-sharp. No one was supposed to know, you mean? No one was supposed to find out that the woman you framed was family. Hart's lawyer objected, mumbling about irrelevant distractions, but the judge's glare silenced him. The courtroom's energy shifted. Marissa's attorney leaned forward, whispering, this changes the case completely. Marissa could barely hear him. Her pulse filled her ears, her mind replaying a lifetime of small humiliations. The clipped instructions, the withheld eye contact, the way Helena had once told her, you people should be grateful to work in a house like this. Every moment of dismissal now looked like something far crueler, a family burying its own bloodline. Helena turned her face away. I didn't know. Marissa let the silence stretch until it hurt. Didn't you? Helena's lips trembled. I knew Harrison had affairs. But he swore none of them mattered. Marissa's hands clenched. You mean the women didn't matter? Their children didn't matter? Ellen stepped closer, eyes glistening. You were his daughter, my half-sister. The word sister landed like a stone dropped in still water. Marissa's breath caught. You knew for how long? Evelyn swallowed hard. A few weeks. When I found the file, I didn't know what to do. Father's lawyers told me to destroy it, that it was a forgery, but I couldn't. I had to show you. Victor finally spoke, voice trembling with control. Enough. You don't understand what you're tampering with. The company, the trust, the media. This revelation would destroy everything Harrison built. Marissa's tone was steel. You mean it would destroy the illusion that your wealth came from clean hands? You stole my name, my place, and when I got too close, you tried to make me disappear. No one spoke. The judge cleared his throat. These claims, but Marissa cut him off, her voice cracking with both fury and grace. These aren't claims, Your Honor. They're confessions written in silence, in sealed documents, in buried truth, in the lives you erase because they don't fit your family portrait. Even the reporters behind the glass fell silent. Her lawyer leaned closer again, whispering, "We can prove this. We can order a paternity test." Marissa nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on Victor. "Do it." Victor exhaled sharply. "You think blood changes anything? You think anyone will see you as more than what you were hired to be?" The words hit like stones. But this time they didn't wound her. They clarified him. They exposed his fear. "Maybe not," she said softly. "But they'll see you differently, and that's enough." The days following the hearing were brutal. The media pivoted from villainizing her to sensationalizing her. The billionaire's hidden daughter, the maid and the dynasty. Commentators speculated endlessly. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it opportunism. Race became the center of every headline, the hidden black heir in an empire built by white privilege. Marissa didn't do interviews. She stayed quiet, working with her attorney and Bates to track down every piece of corroborating evidence. The birth certificate, the archived payment records, even a decades-old letter from Harrison himself written to her mother and signed with his initials. "I'll take care of her, just not publicly." It was enough to order a paternity test. The testing lab confirmed the appointment. She received the sealed packet of forms. Her lawyer scheduled the courier. But something in her gut twisted. The last time she'd trusted a process built by their system, it had turned against her. Still, she went through with it. A sterile room, a simple swab, a signature, a release form. "It'll take about 10 business days," the technician said. She nodded. 10 days to confirm what her heart already knew. During those 10 days, the Harrington family fractured. Helena retreated into isolation, ignoring calls, declining statements. Victor vanished from public view. Evelyn was seen crying outside the courthouse. But one afternoon, Marissa received a letter at her attorney's office. No return address, no signature, just a message typed in all caps. "Stop chasing bloodlines. You don't belong to. You were never meant to be one of us." It was printed on company stationery. Her lawyer wanted to call the police, but she just folded it, slid it into her pocket. She'd lived her whole life, hearing the same words in subtler tones. That night, she returned to her small apartment downtown, a place she'd moved into after being released on bail. She poured tea, sat by the window, and watched rain streak down the glass. The city hummed below. Sirens, headlights, the murmur of strangers. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We intercepted something meant for you. Check your mailbox." Her pulse spiked. She ran downstairs, rain pelting her shoulders. Inside the rusted mailbox sat a torn, water-stained envelope, the logo of the genetic testing company barely visible. She rushed back upstairs, heart pounding, tore it open. Inside wasn't a test result. It was a blank sheet of paper. At the bottom, one line typed in small, elegant letters. Some truths were never meant to be proven. She sank onto the floor, the paper trembling in her hands. The paternity test gone. Intercepted. Destroyed. She looked out the rain-streaked window, the city lights blurring like tears. They had taken her name, her work, her dignity. Now they had taken her proof, but this time, she wasn't powerless, because she still had the recordings, the ledgers, the signature, the whispers that could collapse everything. And she had something else, the quiet, growing certainty that truth always leaves a trace. As thunder rumbled outside, she whispered to herself, "They buried me to hide their sins, but roots don't die underground." Then her phone buzzed again. A new message, same number as before. "If you want the truth, come alone." Midnight. The old estate chapel. She froze. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, determined, dangerous, unafraid. And as the rain hammered harder, she knew she was walking straight into the lion's den. The morning sun cut through the tall courthouse windows in sharp slats across the polished courtroom floor. Marissa stepped through heavy doors, flanked by her attorney and Bates, into a sea of stares. The gallery was packed. Journalists, cameras, curious onlookers, staff and family. Even in her understated black dress, she felt the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their assumptions. But she carried something more: quiet determination. They came in polished shoes and prejudiced minds, expecting to bury her beneath the weight of the Harrington name. The prosecutor's team filed in, crisp suits, faces composed, Hart's legal counsel smoothed jackets, and whispered in the ears of their witnesses. Victor Harrington sat poised in the front row, Helena beside him, expression tight, Evelyn just behind them, her face tense. The judge took his seat, gavel poised. The room's hush draped over Marissa, like a shroud. Her attorney rose first. Your Honor, we are prepared to begin. The defense will call Miss Blake to deliver testimony and submit new documentary evidence that challenges the foundation of the state's case. The prosecutor stiffened. Hart's lawyer glared. The judge nodded. The war had begun. Marissa sat at the defense table. Her heart pounded, but her outward calm was steadfast. The attorney led with her background, her work, the logistical facts of her presence. Step by step he dismantled assumptions, access logs, cleaning routes, staff schedules, timesheets, the kind of dry detail they had used to build the case, now reframed as proof of proximity, not guilt. The air shifted in the room. Then the attorney turned to the folder he'd placed beside her files. Your Honor, the defense now submits what we call the Hidden Vault dossier, secured from the underground repository discovered beneath the mansion. Within are thousands of documents, ledgers, wire transfer records, the secret vault location papers, contractor invoices, internal memos, and recorded conversations implicating Mr. Hart and Mr. Harrington. Gasps rippled in the gallery. Hart's lawyer's face tightened. Victor blinked, as though trying to readjust what he believed. The judge sat upright, keenly alert. His pen paused mid-note. Marissa stood. She walked to the evidence table, her shoulders straight, her voice firm yet measured. Your Honor, this dossier proves what the prosecution has insisted I stole, is instead part of a hidden system they constructed to frame me. The funds, the jewelry, the vault, all of it was under their control, unknown to all others. She motioned to Bates, who stood and nodded. He cued the digital screen behind the judge. Video stills flashed, Hart entering the service corridor, panel walls sliding, documents signed J. Hart and V. Harrington. Ledger entries, move funds clandestine account code vaults. The hush in the courtroom grew loud. Hart's face hardened. Victor's eyes widened. Helena's hand fluttered to her throat, as though the revelation made breathing difficult. Evelyn's lips parted, shock mingling with conflict. The prosecutor looked as if he'd swallowed a bitter pill. The judge leaned forward. I note objections already forming, but I will hear all matters before ruling on admissibility. Ms. Blake, you will now testify. Marissa nodded, steadied. She recounted every step: discovery of the hidden tunnel, the vault beneath the floors, the envelope Evelyn gave her, the audio files Bates delivered, the birth certificate, all in chronological clarity. Her testimony was quiet, resolute, tempered with the pain of betrayal, but also the power of witnessing. Hart's counsel rose in cross-examination. His questions were sharp, insinuating, trying to trip her words, to insinuate, planting evidence, to cast doubt on her credibility. Ms. Blake, isn't it convenient that you discovered the hidden vault just when the heat fell on you? He asked. Isn't it possible you fabricated parts of this case to buy sympathy? Marissa's voice stayed calm. I'm not desperate for sympathy. I'm desperate for truth. She paused, looking directly at Hart. You wanted a scapegoat. I refused to be one. The prosecutor then rose to challenge the dossier's authenticity. But before he could continue, the judge intervened. Both sides will present expert analysis. But I will say this: the dossier is admissible at this stage. The claims inside must be confronted, not dismissed out of hand. Throughout the morning, witnesses were called: the tech manager, archival staff, contractors who had been paid with hush funds. Each corroborated fragments, invoices for hidden construction, payments to shell companies, changes in maintenance routing, off-book ledgers. The courtroom structure began to wobble. By midday, the tension was raw. Reporters held their breath. Family members sat stunned. The Harrington defense team grew frenzied. Objections, motions, whispered counsel in corners. Hart looked cornered. Victor looked as though decades of control had slipped in an instant. Helena sat still, face ashen. Then, just when it seemed the defense had scored its greatest blow, One of Hart's expert analysts stood. He delivered a fresh report. The hidden vault dossier's metadata timestamps had been altered. Someone had manipulated digital file properties to inflate legitimacy. He presented certificate writer logs showing someone with admin access had injected the dossier into their system. The implication: parts of the dossier could be backdated or fabricated. A silence crashed over the room. Marissa's heart sank. Just when she thought the scale had tipped, a counterbalance emerged. The judge's eyes flicked between her and the opposing counsel, weighing the new claim. Marissa pressed her lips shut, steeling herself. She knew the expert had partial truth, but they would argue over manipulation, not the underlying content. She would need to dig deeper, show the raw originals, recover audit trails, outmaneuver that claim. The judge called for lunch recess. The gavel hit wood. Crowds murmured. Marissa quietly sat back, her mind racing. As she gathered her folders, Bates leaned in, voice low. "I'm pulling the chain logs now. The true metadata is hidden. Someone deep in the system disabled audit trails when they injected the files." Her heart raced. The fight would not be over. When court reconvened, the judge asked quietly, "Ms. Blake, are you ready to present the original unaltered files with chain of custody audits?" Marissa rose. Her eyes flashed fire. She nodded. She stepped to the table and laid another document folder she had not mentioned until now, a sealed chain of custody binder, printed raw server backups, time-stamped readouts from off-site servers, showing data transfers beyond Harrington's systems. The judge's eyes widened. She locked eyes with Victor. She locked eyes with Hart. The entire courtroom held its breath. And in that exact moment, a cell phone buzzed from Hart's table. He glanced down. His face went pale. Before the judge could ask what it was, Marissa felt her spine stiffen, as though destiny and danger had intertwined. And though the war had begun, no one expected she would wield proof that even the judge would have to stop and listen. Marissa sat back in the witness chair, but now the courtroom felt different. Not a cage but a battlefield. Her documents, once mere whispers in the shadows, now spoke with authority. The dossier, chain of custody backups, ledger entries, audio files, they had become her armor. Her voice was her weapon, and though the forces against her were immense, she no longer felt powerless. After court reconvened, her defense attorney asked permission to call a surprise witness, the tech manager who had accessed the satellite backup servers. He was led in under oath, stiff in his gray suit, hesitant, glancing at the defense table. When asked his name, he replied, "Darren Rhodes." His hands trembled slightly as he lifted a folder. Under cross-examination, Rhodes explained how he had been coerced earlier to manipulate metadata, disable audit logs, and insert the dossier records into the Harrington systems to simulate authenticity. But when Evelyn's envelope and Bates's recordings exposed deeper conspiracy, Rhodes said he changed sides. He delivered to the defense the original server backups from an off-site location, untouched, untampered. He swore he'd hidden them until now out of fear. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The idea that the narrative had been constructed from within the system. Hart's lawyer protested. "He's unreliable, coerced, compromised." Victor's face reddened. Evelyn glanced at Marissa, urgency in her eyes. The judge allowed the testimony under strict conditions, calling it pivotal. Rhodes passed the folder to the judge. He explained the previews were false timestamps. The real logs, he said, placed many of the incriminating entries before the gala night. He traced server IDs, IP signatures, and timestamps to a secure shell owned by Hart's shell company. He testified that the hidden repository transfers had been made from that same shell, not from Marissa's access terminal. The documents he handed over showed no trace of Marissa's username, only Hart's accounts, and mysteriously trunked sequences leading back to Victor's lawyer's profile. The courtroom shifted. Even prosecution lawyers exchanged glances. Their case wavered. The defense attorney stood and said, "Your Honor, this is exactly why we argued we needed original backups." The manipulations were deep. Yet just when it seemed the momentum had tipped, another twist surfaced. As Rhodes prepared to exit the witness stand, Bates held his arm gently. "Mr. Rhodes, was anyone else threatened or approached about this case?" Rhodes nodded, face pale. He whispered that a night earlier someone had broken into his apartment, taken his laptop and left a note, "Stay silent or disappear." A ripple of horror passed through the courtroom. The judge ordered security to investigate. Marissa's stomach knotted. Someone inside the mansion was silencing witnesses. She realized that the danger to Rhodes was real, and now extended to her. The afternoon wore on. The defense played audio files again. Hart and Victor's voices tied to the hidden vault, the shell networks and threats against Marissa. She watched Hart squirm under cross-examination. She watched Victor's jaw clench, and Helena slump behind him. Evelyn bit her lip, her face white with stress. Then, just before the court recessed, a court officer strode in, whispering to Bates and the judge. Bates's face tightened. The judge looked at Rhodes. Rhodes paled. The room hushed. The officer spoke in low tones. Then the judge turned to the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice heavy, "I regret to inform you that Mr. Rhodes is missing. He did not return to his quarters after court. His phone is unreachable. The bailiff attempted to find him, but the trail is cold." Shock froze the courtroom. Hart's lawyer sputtered. Victor's face drained to ash. Evelyn gasped. Marissa's throat closed. Rhodes, the man who gave the original proof, had vanished. She inhaled. Pulse thunderous. If Rhodes disappeared, the only person now able to validate the deepest truth had been silenced. She stared at the empty chair where Rhodes had sat, and as the courtroom erupted into chaos, she realized the proof that could save her was walking off a cliff, unless she acted first. The courtroom's shock over Rhodes's disappearance rippled into every corner of the building. Whispers rushed through halls and corridors. "He's missing," they silenced him. "What else will they take?" Marissa's pulse pounded as panic tried to break the fragile calm she'd held. In that tension, she realized betrayal could take many forms, even from those she trusted most. Late that night, after the court recessed, she slipped quietly into the staff quarters. The dim corridor smelled of linoleum polish, old dust, distant voices muffled behind closed doors. She passed Rose's room first, but saw the door closed, silence within. Then she came to the quarters of her closest ally among the staff, Clarice. Clarice had been a friend since Marissa's first week. They shared smiles in passing, whispered warnings about overheard conversations, exchanged soft confidences. Marissa knocked gently. Clarice opened the door wide enough to slip her head through, face drawn. Her eyes were red, her cheeks damp. "Marissa, please, don't come in." "I need to talk," Marissa said, voice low. Clarice bit her lip, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, the single bed, the small dresser, personal clutter turned messy. Clarice motioned for silence. "They came tonight." Marissa's heart lurched. "Who came?" Clarice swallowed. "Someone upstairs in a black suit. He asked for Rhodes, asked where you were, asked about your files. I told him I didn't know." Marissa's chest tightened. "What did you tell him about me?" Clarice's voice was small. "I told him you were scared, that you wanted to lay low. I told him you might hand over evidence. I said you had nothing else. I tried to protect you." "Protect me?" Marissa's voice cracked. "You betrayed me." Clarice's shoulders shook. "I was scared. When they threatened Rhodes, he begged me to watch you. He said if they found you, they'd destroy you. I thought if I placated them, they'd leave you alone." Her tears glistened under the single ceiling bulb. Marissa inhaled slowly, mind reeling. Betrayal lanced like steel, not betrayal from a stranger, but from someone like family. Clarice met her eyes. "I'm sorry. I thought I was saving your life." Marissa closed her eyes. She let the hurt wash over her, then forced it down. "You won't do anything else without telling me," she said. Clarice nodded. Frightened. "I won't." Marissa pressed on. "What else did he ask?" Clarice swallowed. "He asked where Evelyn was. He asked which file you trusted most. He asked if you had sent anything to outside servers. He asked anything." "Marissa, I told him I didn't know, but I saw his name tag. Hart's associate." Marissa's breath caught. The Wallace of betrayal had extended deeper than she thought. Clarice closed her door softly. Marissa walked back through the silent corridor, mind racing, trying to recalibrate trust. The next morning, the courtroom reconvened. The missing Rhodes case was front and center. Prosecutors were more aggressive, counsel more defensive. Marissa sat rigid in the witness stand, steely eyes scanning the room. Newspapers whispered in the gallery. Cameras glared. Suddenly, the defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, the defense would like to call Evelyn Harrington to the stand as a witness. She has first-hand knowledge relevant to Blake's relationship with the Harrington family and can address the alleged hidden vault documents and family lineage evidence." The courtroom murmured. Victor's face sharpened. Helena's eyes narrowed. Evelyn rose and stepped forward. She looked determined, resolute, pale yet composed. Marissa's heart hammered. Evelyn taking the stand was a pivot she both needed and feared. Evelyn swore the oath, sat at the witness table, and faced cross-examination from Hart's lawyer. His questions were sharp, probing her motives. Miss Harrington, earlier you gave your sister's evidence to the court. Do you understand that by doing so, you accused your own family of betrayal? Evelyn's chin lifted. I understand the weight of what I did. I also know that loyalty to truth is greater than loyalty to illusion. Hart's lawyer pressed. Do you admit you planted or influenced those documents? Are you seeking revenge against your father's company? Ellen shook her head. No. I only did what was right. She was careful, firm, distancing herself from Marissa's role, but bridging enough to validate the dossier. She explained how she discovered the secret repository file in archival records, how she risked consequences to retrieve it, knowing the gamble it posed. She said she believed in Marissa's innocence before ever meeting her. She asserted her sisterhood. The gallery hushed. Victor's arms folded. Hart's jaw clenched. Helena's expression flickered. Marissa watched Evelyn fight under cross-exam, each question a blade she had to dodge. Evelyn answered with composure, acknowledging the scandal it would cause, but urging that the truth must be revealed. As Evelyn left the stand, her face was pale but unwavering. The judge adjourned for recess. The courtroom buzzed with speculation. Would Evelyn's testimony turn the tide? Would she betray her family for it? Marissa's attorney approached her. Bates stepped close. Evelyn walked past, giving Marissa a brief nod. Solidarity, perhaps warning. Marissa inhaled, eyes blazing, then looked toward the judge's bench, knowing that the real trial was shifting from evidence to legacy and loyalty. Just then, the bailiff approached with a sealed note. He handed it to Marissa, whispering, "This came for you." She unfolded the note, her face drained. It read, "Tell no one. I know where Rhodes is, and so do they." She looked across the courtroom at Evelyn, Hart, Victor, Bates, each face a mask. Time slowed. The next witness was called, and Marissa realized Evelyn wouldn't be the only one forced to choose. In the hush between courtroom sessions, the Harrington legal team made their move. The settlement offer arrived in heavy black folders, delivered under guard to Marissa's attorney. The envelope flap bore the Harrington seal. Inside were terms that shimmered like gold, enough money to change her life, to silence the world. A non-disclosure agreement, no admission of wrongdoing, confidential settlement, and a clause that if she spoke she would owe them tens of millions. She handled the papers carefully, feeling their weight, the promise and the trap. Her attorney sat across from her in his office, walls lined with legal tomes, windows revealing the city skyline. He looked at her with measured eyes. "They're offering you more than you've ever dreamed," he said quietly. "Think about your future. Think about your safety. They want this to go away." Marissa folded her hands in her lap. She felt the gravity. The money could pay for her family, for a new home, for security, but with it came the cost of her voice, the loss of truth. The hush they wanted would be absolute. She'd never be free. Outside, in the halls, the press speculated wildly. Did Marissa accept the hush deal? Is the billionaire buying silence? How much is truth worth? Inside, Victor Harrington met with his legal counsel and the prosecutor in a discreet back room. His face was rigid. "We must contain her," he said. "Offer her enough she can't refuse, but in a way that kills momentum." The prosecutor nodded. The deal was drawn up to suppress more than money, to suppress a scandal. That afternoon, her attorney returned with the papers. Marissa studied the clauses: non-disparagement, gag order, lifetime confidentiality, legal penalties. He urged caution. A settlement doesn't guarantee safety, he warned. This could be a trap. Marissa swallowed. She thought of years of being silenced, being ignored, being framed. She thought of Evelyn's testimony, of Bates's recordings, of Rhodes's disappearance. She thought of Clarice's betrayal, and the note warning she not trust Evelyn. She thought of her own birthright, the hidden vault, the ledger implicating Victor and Hart. She felt the fire in her core. This was bigger than money. This was justice. Slowly she shook her head. "I won't sign." Her attorney blinked. "That changes everything." He rose and exited to inform the Harrington team. The silence in his absence was heavy. When he returned, the offer was retracted. The floor plan changed. The hush was now threatened with contempt, countersuits, smear campaigns. In court that afternoon, the judge reconvened. The gallery was packed. The press filed in, eyes hungry. Hart's team looked brittle. Victor sat distant. Helena beside him, looking resigned. Evelyn sat behind her mother, guarded but resolute. The prosecutor stood. Miss Blake, the state offers you option of settlement to spare the court time and resources. If accepted, the case will be closed. If not, the full trial continues. Marissa rose, voice measured. The courtroom quieted. She clutched the mic at the defense table, an object she'd avoided treating like a weapon before. Now she held it deliberately. Her attorney cleared his throat. She looked at him and nodded. He stepped back. Marissa raised her voice, clear and firm. I reject your offer, she said. Justice is not for sale. I reject the silence you demand. I reject the lie you built. I reject being invisible. Gasps echoed. The judge paused, surprised. The prosecutor's face turned sharp. Hart's eyes blazed. Victor leaned forward, stunned. Marissa held the courtroom's gaze. I have evidence. I have truth. I have the right to speak it. If this trial continues, I will speak, and all of history will hear, not only what you did, but why you thought I'd never speak. I will not be silenced. The judge's gavel hovered. The hush was thick. Suddenly, a voice rang behind her, strong, authoritative. She has every right to speak. Heads turned. Detective Marlowe Bates stood at the back of the courtroom, framed by the doorway, his trench coat damp. He stepped forward, eyes meeting hers. The people deserve her voice. A ripple moved through the room. Victor's lips parted. Helena looked away. Evelyn's eyes shone. The judge leaned forward, absorbing the shift. In that moment, the courtroom shifted. She was no longer a defendant, asking for leniency. She was a woman demanding truth. Then, just as the judge raised his pen to pronounce order, a hush rippled through the gallery. The double doors at the back burst open. A man in a suit strode in. Not a lawyer, not a bailiff. Someone unfamiliar, intense, purposeful. He carried a sealed envelope. He paused in the doorway, scanning the room, and then his gaze locked on Marissa. He lifted the envelope. He said, I bring new evidence, and someone inside this room doesn't want it revealed. The courtroom froze. Marissa's heart thundered. She realized the settlement was never the biggest threat. This new evidence was. As the man sealed in the courtroom reached Marissa's table, the judge silently nodded, and all eyes turned his way. The morning sunlight forced its way through the stained glass windows of the courtroom, painting fractured colors across the marble floor. The gallery was packed. Reporters, cameras, families, activists, everyday people who had watched the trial unfold on screens. Outside, protesters held signs, Justice for Marissa Blake, Expose Harrington Lies, A Maid is a Human. The country watched. The live stream viewership exploded. The woman they once called a thief now had America listening. Inside, tension crackled in the air. The judge's bench loomed. Camera lights caught the sheen of polished wood. Microphones sat between attorneys. Victor and Helena sat stiff in the front row, Evelyn behind them. Hart's legal team fidgeted with papers. Bates stood at the back, silent sentinel. Marissa entered, her black dress simple, her posture straight, her eyes sharp and poised. She felt the weight of the moment in every breath. Her defense attorney approached. With a nod, she rose and crossed to the lectern. The room hushed. She stood before the cameras, the judge, the jury, the public. The moment belonged to her. She began quietly, voice clear. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marissa Blake. I stand here today not as someone begging for mercy, but as a witness to truth. She laid the evidence before the court. The hidden vault beneath the mansion, the ledger entries, the original metadata logs, the audio recordings, the birth certificate, Evelyn's testimony. She walked them through betrayal, collusion, concealment, and finally, reclamation. Her voice didn't waver. She told the jury, I was the maid. You saw me dust, clean, tidy the halls. But you did not see me rid. You did not see me remember. You did not see me resist. They believed invisible hands were never dangerous, but they were wrong. Every camera zoomed in. Every spectator leaned forward. She spoke of how systems built on racism erase lives quietly. She spoke of how her story was dismissed until she forced it into the open. She spoke of names, of deeds. She named Julian Hart. She named Victor Harrington. She named Owens, the head of security, and Helena, the silent guardian of their illusions. She named the shell company, the off-site server, The secrecy network. She named the lies. She named the cost. Eleanor watched from behind, face lined, proud. Bates's eyes glinted with guarded affirmation. Cameras flashed. The country's eyes were hers now. Then Marissa paused. The hush grew dense. Every ear in the courtroom, every viewer online, hung on what she would say next. She straightened, fingers resting on the lectern. She raised her voice just enough to be heard beyond this moment, beyond these walls. She said 6 words that would change the world. I am Harrington's daughter. Hear me. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. The judge stilled. Legal teams recoiled. Victor and Helena gasped. Evelyn's eyes widened. The gallery rose in murmurs. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. The courtroom doors stirred. The live stream spiked. News bulletins flashed across networks. Her 6 words broke the illusion. They forced reconsideration. They shifted the narrative. A black maid was no longer the frame. She was family. The scandal now cut deeper than theft. It cut into legacy, identity, inheritance. Outside, protesters cheered. Social media headlines exploded. Maid says she's billionaire's daughter. Hidden bloodline exposed. Race, power, and inheritance. People debated, cried, shared. Her name trended. Her story became movement. Inside that courtroom, Marissa stood firm, breathing deep. She had taken the mic. She had turned evidence into voice. She had forced them to look at her, not past her. She had rewritten the story they wrote for her. The judge cut in. We will recess until tomorrow. Proceedings will resume with cross-examination of Ms. Harrington and Mr. Harrington regarding paternity claims. All parties are to preserve evidence and refrain from public commentary. But the scrutiny would not diminish. The nation would watch. The media would dissect every syllable. The Harrington empire would strain under new pressure. The legal war was far from over. Marissa stepped down from the lectern, met Evelyn's eyes, met Bates's, met her attorneys. She felt something inside settle. She had reclaimed her name, her narrative, her truth. Yet as she walked past the gallery, she saw a man in a dark suit slip out a side door. Someone she recognized. Someone from the mansion. He held a briefcase, his face hidden. He paused in the foyer, glanced back at her, and vanished. And in that instant, Marissa knew. The courtroom might have heard her. But the real conflict, outside these walls, in power rooms, in hidden chambers, was just beginning. Because when she spoke those 6 words, she didn't just open a case. She opened a movement. Some stories aren't just meant to be watched. They're meant to be felt. If Marissa's truth hits something deep in you, don't scroll past it. Type yes if you believe voices like hers deserve to be heard. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.